Glenn.
Thank you. It's a question about negative campaigning, which I'm quite intrigued by. Both Andy Burnham and Ed Balls have issued dire warnings this morning as to what will happen if there's a Conservative government. So I think the question to you two is, what do you say to the accusation that you are simply scaremongering? And looking at your poster, it's got a picture of David Cameron on it. And we noticed, a couple of days ago, the Conservatives brought one out with pictures of Gordon Brown. And the problem, isn't it, is that if you're driving along and you just see that poster, what you see is a face of David Cameron. And if people have got time to read it and work out what it says, then all well and good. But do you think negative campaigning generally works, or does it put people off?
Don't accept that we're engaging in negative campaigning when you're describing the consequences of your opponent's policies. I mean, this is extraordinarily serious. I mean, look, it's all very well to come up with some sort of rebranding exercise, as David Cameron and Steve Hilton have done. A sort of culmination, not of a policy rethink, but of a new marketing strategy for the Conservative Party. And you call it the big idea or big society or whatever it is. And you say, everyone's going to have the chance to run all their public services for themselves. What's the point of doing that if at the same time they're going to cut budgets, with the consequences that people are going to be taught less well because there are going to be fewer teachers and fewer teaching assistants in the schools, if National Health Service budgets are not going to remain as they are? Do you really think that patients in hospitals would like to see power passed back to the system, to cooperatives run by teachers and doctors, rather than maintaining the guarantees of clear standards that they're entitled to expect, with sanctions if those standards are not realised and if those guarantees are not met? This is a choice. And it's a choice between a Conservative future and a progressive future, and that's the point that we're making today. Andy, I don't know whether you want to add.
Just quickly, Peter. Glenn, I began by 5 very clear points about how we build a more personal and preventative NHS. But I am also saying clearly that to remove some of the standards and the discipline we have brought to the NHS is a recipe for a return to the bad old days. And actually, I feel quite angry about that. I know the work that has gone in to making the NHS what it is today. It has been really hard graft to get the NHS up to this level. And at a stroke, they say, well, we'll take all of that away. And I think it's absolutely legitimate, as Peter says, for us to point that out. The Tory strategy on the NHS is literally to say anything that they like, to neutralise it in their view. So they go around saying unspecified funding increases, that any new drug that comes along, well, that will be funded. All difficult changes in the NHS will be suspended. I'm afraid it's lacking honesty. This is just saying anything on the NHS to take it away as an issue. And we are absolutely justified, in my view, in pointing out these differences.
Just to add, Peter, just to take 2 examples. in Barking and Dagenham, there will be 1.2 million of funding to guarantee 2,600 pupils extra one-to-one catch-up tuition next year. In Northamptonshire, there will be £3.2 million for 7,940 children who will get extra one-to-one tuition next year. The figures are here positively for every area in the whole country. That is a guarantee from Labour, a guarantee which isn't matched by the Conservatives. In fact, they will be reducing the numbers of teachers when we actually need to have more teachers delivering one-to-one tuition. That isn't about negative campaigning. That's about a choice. And it's setting out the choice very clearly. And I think, then you have a responsibility to ask the Conservatives, well, where will they find these cuts from? And who will pay the price? That's a choice.
Okay, last question over here.
Yeah, it's Eduardo Suárez from El Mundo, Spain. The first one for you, Lord Mandelson. You have fought lots of political campaigns. Is this the most difficult one you have fought so far?
I think 1987 has the edge.
Really? Isn't it more difficult, this one?
I think on balance, yes. It was sort of following not too long after 1983, if I remember rightly. Andrew would remember, most of you wouldn't. You're too young.
You told me about it.
I don't know.
Okay, and 2 other questions. One for Ed Balls. Are you disappointed that the Mossbourne Academy head is not one of the signatories in the Guardian letter? And the other one for Andy Burnham. You have said that your new cancer guarantee will save 10,000 lives. Does it mean that in the last 13 years you have let 130,000 people die in this country? Thank you.
Ed?
We have 51 head teachers who have written a letter to The Guardian, I understand. And I've seen the list. And there's a lot of very distinguished heads in there, including some of the heads who are running academies and running on new chains of schools. So it's a distinguished list. If I had to guess, I would say it will grow and multiply in the weeks to come if other heads are given the opportunity to sign up to this letter.
Andy?
Our commitment on the one-week cancer rate for test results has been very carefully chosen. Experts tell us that it can save up to 10,000 lives a year. To answer your question, when we came into government, we set a very ambitious target to reduce mortality from cancer, 20% reduction in mortality in under 75s. Now, the last report from the National Cancer Director said that we'd brought that down by 19.3%, so we're on target to reach it. And the latest figures on cancer came out a couple of weeks ago, show that cancer mortality in England is falling faster than the average across the EU for men and women. So we're actually making incredibly good progress, but we're clear that the next frontier in terms of tackling cancer is improving early diagnosis, and that's why we've made this pledge.
And if you haven't seen it, let me commend Ken Clarke's interview in the Financial Times this morning. It makes very, very good reading. He sneers at industrial policy and our pro-manufacturing and pro-technology policies that we've been pursuing. He says this splurge he likens Lord Mandelson to a Bourbon monarch who went round in his coach throwing out gold coins. So we know from that what the Conservatives would do for industrial policy and pro-manufacturing policies in the country, and we know also what they would do for what Mr. Cameron describes as regional stuff. This is regional investment, regional jobs, regional infrastructure. And I think as he sort of looks down his rather long toffee nose at the regions, people will come back and say thank you very much, ripping up our regional plans, ripping up regional investment, closing down the regional development agencies are going to cost jobs, they're going to cost investment in every region of the country. So I commend it to you. It's good reading. Thank you very much indeed.
No coachman sacked by Labour.
I thought you were a Habsburg.
We'll keep the footman.